Welcome back again. I hope you had time to dress up because, as I have promised you, we are going to the Sydney Opera House. It is really our honor to have two distinguished people that they have been running the Sydney Opera House during the lockdown to talk to us about their experience and what visitors, virtual visitors or real visitors can actually now experience in Sydney Opera House. We have 1 hour with them. We will first have a 20 minutes interview with Jade McLaren, the Director of Visitor Experience in Sydney Opera House. And then Declan Jenkins will take over and he will curate for our virtual back of the house tour of Sydney Opera House. So I will not delay more. I will start with the interview so we don't waste time. But before I do this, I would like to present you and give you some more information about who Jade is. Jade is currently the Director of Visitor Experience of the Sydney Opera House. She started her role back in 2015. Part of her portfolio incorporates visitor experience, tours, ticketing, access, food and beverage retailing, and oh my God, that's too much already, Jade. Jade actually joined the Opera House back in 2013 as the General Manager Tours, so she has experience about the guided tours as well. But that's not only. Jade has a 19 years experience in tourism and attractions. She has previously worked as the General Manager of the Sydney Aquarium. She has been the General Manager of the Sydney Tower and Head of the Sydney Attractions of Merlin Entertainments Group, which actually features and includes 6 attractions, drawing more than 2.5 million paid visitors per year. So you always go to the big attractions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Keep it big, yes.
I'm not sure what I'll do next.
It is our honor to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting.
So what I will do, I will ask you some questions and then I will give the floor to our audience to ask any questions. They can type in their questions in the chat facility of Zoom or in Events Air. I think I do not have to repeat again how COVID has disrupted everyone and of course you. Can you very quickly describe us what it meant for you as Sydney Opera House, the lockdown?
So I think there's a couple of things. So I think I'll start by saying we were in a slightly, I wouldn't say more fortunate position, but we had already planned to close our concert hall for 2020 for major renovations. So at the end of January, we closed that venue. And so with that, we'd already downsized our workforce slightly. Our programming had downsized. So we actually started with a slightly sort of smaller base than what we would normally be working with. But what it meant for us, the journey to close down was rapid, I suppose you would say. So the end of January, some of the tour guides that Declan works with started to get a little bit nervous about this thing that they'd heard of, coronavirus. You know, we've got a team together to start to chat about it. And we thought, oh, this will never happen. But we put a couple of contingencies in place. We started to plan for how would our teams work from home? What are the extra cleaning regimes we need to have on site? What would it mean if we had to close the Opera House? There were all these things that we started to sort of workshop, but never expected it to actually happen. And then one of the major theatres in Italy closed, we started to think, oh, this is getting a bit serious. And then 2 weeks later, on the 16th of March, all operations at the Opera House shut down. And we were closed until our food and beverage operations reopened in September of 2020. So we had a 6-month closure with no workers on site except for construction workers, no shows physically in the building, no tours, no retail, no food and beverage. What it did give us an opportunity to was to pivot to the digital space and to try things that we've been thinking about trying for a really, really long time and just hadn't had the impetus to sort of kick off and do.
Brilliant. So you definitely were not hibernating.
No.
Give us some examples of some virtual visitor experience that you have developed and been offering.
Yeah, so in 2019, we developed a digital content strategy, and a recommendation out of that strategy was to hire a head of digital programming for the Opera House. Now, we were quite lucky that he started in October, and he'd only just in February of 2020 had his strategy sort of signed off. But with that came quite a few complications. But when COVID happened, all of a sudden there was almost um, he couldn't do what he liked, but there was this extra sort of support and sort of team camaraderie to sort of get some of these digital programs up and live that we've been talking about for a really long time. So by the end of March, we'd launched what we called From Our House to Yours, which was a digital season which would bring things out of the archives. We brought videos that people hadn't seen for years up, and we've created a weekly program of events that people could participate in online for free. And then by the middle of April, we were actually curating and filming brand new content in a COVID safe way to share on our channel. So over the 6 months that we ran that From Our House to Yours program, 6.5 million people tuned in to view the content. Over 450,000 people, so over 450,000 hours of content was viewed. And there were some really interesting learnings that came out of the back of that. What we found was that 30% of people that participated weren't traditional visitors to the Opera House. Over 90% of people said that they would watch again. And then most importantly, 30% of people said that they would actually pay for the privilege of enjoying things from their own home, which was great. We did it obviously for entertainment and to enrich the lives of the community while we were closed. And one of the really other interesting insights that came out of it was that after entertainment, people said that the second sort of benefit from some of the digital programming we were offering was actually the contribution to their well-being and health, way above saving money or any of those things. So it had a really nice positive impact on the community more broadly.
Brilliant. So it would not be an exaggeration to say COVID was actually a blessing. You had the time to implement what you wanted,
Yep.
and you also educated or trained new audience to experience you.
Absolutely. And I think it was a really great opportunity to try things we've been talking about for a really long time, and also to break down some of those barriers from why some of the challenges around delivering digital content, such as rights. And it gave us a new angle to sort of talk to artists about, you may not have wanted us to share this digitally before, but because of COVID and the change across the industry, and that we were able to sort of share things that in 2019 we wouldn't have been able to, which is great.
But were you ready to respond so quickly? Did you have the tools? Did you have the skills? And what was required?
So I think we were ready to respond very quickly because we had just, I'm going to say good management, but I think it was a bit of good luck. We had just appointed that head of digital programming, and he had a strategy that he just had signed off. So we had a framework that we could kick off with quickly. We have very talented people around the business that were able to pull together and get all of this content up very quickly. We have an in-house recording and broadcast studio, which definitely helped with that as well. But then in terms of what the longer term strategy means, we definitely don't have the tools for that. And that's something that we're looking at the moment. If we were to, for example, make our content sort of pay-per-view on an ongoing basis, we would need to work on and install some new technology.
So it is kind of fair to say that the winners or the early respondents to COVID were the ones that they had plans already.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, yeah, but there are issues in terms of how COVID has increased the digital divide, they would say, the ones that were ready and the ones that they were not ready. And how would you see that the learnings from COVID has actually informed or revised the pre-existing digital strategy that you had? Are you going to increase it, change it, improve it? What's the future?
I think there's a few things to answer that question. First, I think it reinforced that we were on the right track, which was the first part, which was good. Secondly, I think we did a few trials when we came back and we reopened our doors to shows in October. In our November, we have a series of shows, talks called anecdote, which are sort of small talks and things around the Opera House. And we actually live stream some of those on a pay-per-view basis as a test, and they were really well received. So we know that we will start to think about that as we're programming in the years ahead. What is the on-site physical component of the performing arts, but then what's the digital arm that goes with that? We've done some research that makes us think that there won't be any cannibalization of the on-site audience by offering a digital piece as well. And we're currently looking at what is the platform for the Opera House to deliver that. Is it a Vimeo? Is it something that we do that is bespoke? So we're really in the early stages of formalizing what our longer term digital strategy would be. And separate to that, we've worked with the tours team to create the digital tour that Declan will take everybody on a little bit later.
Of course. What would you say are the major transformations of your market, if there are any transformations at the moment, or that you envision?
I think what we've seen is a real willingness to come back. I think we probably more than we expected. We're currently at 75% capacity for shows. So anything we put on our stages, we can have 75% of the audience filled. I think we were a bit nervous about people's appetite to come back while we're still in a pandemic, but we've actually found the opposite. Everybody is dying to come back and engage with the art. Our restaurants are getting busier. The site is getting busier. We've got more and more shows booking and coming down into the pipeline. So I think it's just that when you take away the art, I think everyone's just so excited to get back and start participating again.
Mm-hmm. So definitely the face-to-face visiting is never going to die.
No, it will not.
Increased after this prolonged lockdown in some way.
Yeah.
Now, Sydney Opera House it's listed as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Mm-hmm. What did this mean in terms of stress, resources, priorities, in terms of how you had to address the lockdown or to respond to the crisis?
Well, our building team, Dean, who heads up our building team and some of the heritage aspects, he loved the shutdown because it meant that we got to do some work that had been on our backlog list for a very long time. We are a very busy performing arts centre with very few dark days in our theatres. So it actually gave him the opportunity to do a number of projects that had been in the back burner and actually supported some of our heritage goals, which was quite a good outcome.
Did you get any support by UNESCO? Did any funds from international or local government or
not international but local government? There was a stimulus package across government for anybody who had projects that were what they called shovel ready. So if you had a project you'd scoped up, you had a business case ready for it, but you didn't have the funds, you could put in a bid for government for that, and we were successful. So there's quite a few accessibility upgrades and other not operational projects, but just maintenance projects that we'll be able to deliver this year off the back of some of that funding.
Nice. You have experience from other attractions. Do you think that other attractions in our economy have equally responded, or they were facing different constraints that you didn't? And what's your overall understanding of the sector?
So from a visitor attraction sector versus the art sector, I catch up regularly with my colleagues from the aquarium and also from Taronga Zoo and other attractions. I think the CBD of Sydney was very heavily impacted by COVID. I think even as people started to come back out again, the suburbs and the towns were really alive. But the city of Sydney as a destination, and any of the attractions or any other facilities in the heart of the CBD really struggle and continue to struggle. I think we won't be until sort of Q2 of this year when people start to come back into the offices in the city and the city has a bit more of a life about it, where we really see some of those other attractions start to get back to some kind of level of visitation that is commercially appropriate.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so thank you. I don't want to monopolize the discussion, so I would like to give the floor to any of the online participants to post their questions. As I said before, please write them on the chat facility of Zoom or on the platform of Events Air that we're using. I already see one comment of somebody saying, oh, wow, you have actually managed to achieve a goal to enrich the life of the community. Was that a goal always of the organization?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's actually part of our mission is to treasure and renew the Opera House and to enrich the lives of the community. So it's actually part of our mission, vision, and values. It's all about community enrichment and bringing art to people.
Well, from my perspective, to be honest, I was really happy to hear from you earlier on saying that all these virtual experiences that you have been offering have actually contributed to the well-being of people being locked down, which to me it's equally important. I think what COVID has made us realize as well is how important is traveling from a well-being perspective.
Absolutely.
Able to go out, to visit places, to interact with others, it does affect our well-being, and we really need to do it in whatever format. So yeah, probably you could use some statistics like this to reinforce your important role in our society.
Absolutely.
There is another question. Is being as famous as the Sydney Opera House a challenge when you want to do new things?
I would say
create additional stress.
Well, I think yes. I'm just trying to figure out how to answer this one. Sometimes I think you would say yes. I mean, particularly not so much from in the digital space, but more in the physical, because we are a World Heritage listed building. So, for example, our food and beverage restaurants on the outside of the building, they may want to do something really theatrical and bright and colourful to attract new audiences, and they can't do that. So everything has to be within, keeping of the soft palette of the Opera House. So there's certain things around the outside of the building that definitely it's expensive because we're heritage listed. There's a whole heap of sort of rigor and structure around our conservation management plan. But in terms of the digital and what goes on the stages and the art, we don't have the same sort of challenges around process. Definitely have challenges around expectations around quality, but we can definitely be a little bit more nimble and agile when it comes to the artistic and innovative side versus the physical building and the precinct.
Brilliant. Well, anyone who does something new has always a challenge or a stress. Anyway, so thank you very much, Jade. I'm looking at the clock and I need to allow enough time for Declan, who is waiting here to bring us around the Sydney Opera House.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jade, for all of that as well.
So yours.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for everything that was just said. It was all very interesting, certainly from my perspective, but definitely very timely. So, everyone, what we're going to be doing is just taking a bit of a tour of the Opera House, and this will also give you a bit of an idea about one of the digital experiences that we've been working on throughout the pandemic, and the ways in which we're able to bring it to people from all over the world without them necessarily needing to get down to Sydney itself or being able to get down to Sydney itself. So I'm just going to really quickly share my screen and we'll kick that tour off. Fantastic. All right. Now, there will be a couple of question times as well during this tour, so feel free to just throw those into the chat section at any point you would like, and we'll come around to them when we can. Well, folks, without further ado, so everyone, welcome to the Sydney Opera House. Despite what the name suggests, the Opera House is home to much more than just the opera. It's actually one of the busiest performing arts centres in the world. And up until our closure earlier in March 2020, we're actually hosting around 1,800 performances every year. Now, these performances take place under the 3 sets of sails you can see in front of you. To the left, we have Benelong, our fine dining restaurant. In the middle, the concert hall, and to the right, the Jones Sutherland Theatre. Now, these sails sit atop a podium which houses the Drama Theatre, Studio and Playhouse theatres, as well as the Utzon Room. But before we learn more about the site, I'd actually like to show you a glimpse of some of the performances we have here. The land on which the Opera House stands is today known as Bennelong Point. It's an area of land that is of great significance to the First Nations people of Australia. Prior to the arrival of English settlers in 1788, it was actually known as Tubagali, home to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, a gathering place for eating, singing, dancing, and telling stories. During those times, crossing into another group's country required request for permission to enter. When permission was granted, the hosting group would welcome the visitors, offering them safe passage and protection for their spiritual being during the journey. While visitors were provided with a safe passage, they also had to respect the protocols and rules of the landowners whilst on their country. As visitors today, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the Gadigal, who were the first Indigenous men and women to inhabit this land, and pay our respects to both elders past, present, and also emerging. Today, this land on which the Sydney Opera House stands is still a place to eat, gather, and tell stories, just in a very different way to back then. Amongst those who continue to tell their stories on this land is the Bangarra Dance Theatre, one of the world's leading Indigenous dance companies, who usually call our drama theatre home. As iconic as the sales of the Sydney Opera House have been, this building is perhaps one of the most recognisable in the world, my apologies, reflecting the sun like a combination of ice and snow. To give you some background as to how the Sydney Opera House came to be, its design was actually born out of an international competition held in 1958. The competition attracted 220 entries from all over the world. The winning entry, however, was number 218, a revolutionary design from a little-known Danish architect by the name of Jørn Utzon. Now, whilst Utzon was responsible for the exterior of the building, the inside was designed by an Australian architect named Peter Hall, who took over the project after Utzon's departure in 1966. We'll learn more about that a little later on in the tour. So here we are, underneath that podium, heading towards stage door. This is where staff and performers enter the Opera House. Through these doors have walked thousands of actors and performers, famous names such as Cate Blanchett, Dame Joan Sutherland, Prince, Bob Dylan, and even Queen Elizabeth herself, who actually opened the Sydney Opera House back in 1973. So folks, I think it's about time we head inside this magnificent building and take a bit of a look behind the scenes.
Hi, welcome to Sydney Opera House.
So this is the main rehearsal room of the Sydney Opera House. The Sydney Opera House is actually home to a number of resident companies, one of the biggest of which is the Australian Ballet. Founded in 1962, it's headed up by its artistic director, David Holberg, himself a world-renowned dancer from the United States. Normally off limits to the public, this room is used by the ballet to rehearse current and upcoming productions, and is fitted out with mirrors and bars to assist the dancers as they rehearse. The dimensions of this space perfectly mimic the space on the Joan Sutherland Theatre stage where the ballet is performed. This allows them to mark out the room with the exact locations of sets, scenery, and positioning cues for dancers, making the process of planning and rehearsing a production a far more realistic one. Now, the flooring you can see here is also unique to the ballet. It's actually what's called a sprung floor. Sandwiched between these two plywood planks is some foam cushioning. Now, this ensures that the dancers have a little bit of give in the floor to help protect their knees and feet. Now, it's covered in a black material, not unlike kitchen linoleum. It's called tarquet. Now, this surface allows the dancers to both slide freely, but also provide them with the ability to grip and dig their toes in as is needed. How about we meet some of these dancers?
Hi everyone, here we are in the main rehearsal room of the Opera House. This is where some of the magic is prepared. My name is Simon Kenway and I'm a conductor for both the Australian Ballet and Opera Australia. Today we are very fortunate to be joined by two brilliant young dancers, Belle Irwin and Cameron Holmes. Belle, how did you first get into classical dance?
I'm originally from Sydney. I started ballet at the age of 4 with my 3 siblings. I left home at the age of 14 to relocate to Melbourne to start my training at the Australian Ballet School full-time. After graduating, I was accepted into the Australian Ballet Company as a Porter Ballet member.
Hi, I'm Cameron Holmes, and this is my 3rd year with the Australian Ballet. Ballet for me is about that strive for perfection, and today we are rehearsing Swan Lake and I'm performing the Malvariation Siegfried solo.
Fantastic. Does anyone actually have any questions at this stage?
I don't see anything.
If not, that is absolutely fine. No, that's okay. There'll be a couple of more opportunities to ask any questions. If anything does come to mind, feel free to just ask retrospectively as well. All righty. So everyone, welcome to the scenery dock of the Jones Sutherland Theatre. Now this is the space where we store our sets and scenery for both the opera and the ballet. These sets arrive by truck to an underground loading dock, a full 13 metres below where we're standing now. From there, they are wheeled into this enormous lift you see before you, brought up and stored here ready to make their way to the stage. Now in the peak of opera season, this would be an area crammed full of sets and scenery for up to 5 different operas, waiting to be assembled for each performance. In most opera houses around the world, however, all of this would happen to the sides or rear of the stage in what is called the wings. But because of the unique design of the opera house sails, we simply don't have that luxury of wing space. What we do have, however, is all of this space underneath the stage. The trick, though, is getting it from down here all the way up onto the stage, 3 floors above. To do so, we use another massive lift. This is called the rear stage lift, and it actually forms the rear third of the stage above. But just as we've seen, it can be lowered down to this level where the sets, scenery, actors, actresses, and even live animals can be loaded on and taken up to the stage above. Now, the job of operating these lifts falls to our mechs or stage crew, who are responsible for moving the set and scenery up onto the stage. Once at stage level, the pieces are wheeled off the lift and then, like a large jigsaw puzzle, are put together for each different performance. Now, after the performance, this process is then reversed. On matinee days, this will happen up to 4 times in one afternoon. It's an enormous amount of work. It's a little bit like building and dismantling small houses several times in the space of half a day. So you can imagine how difficult that is. All right, let's take a ride up to the stage. What a view, huh? Well, welcome to the Jones Sutherland Theatre stage, home to both Opera Australia, who perform approximately 184 operas and musicals each year in 3 separate seasons, and also to the Australian Ballet, who perform 92 ballets across 2 seasons each year. Now, most operas, especially the big ones, such as La Bohème and La Traviata, require enormous, sometimes elaborate sets. And from here, you can see just how little wing space there actually is to work with. That's the side of our stage and the outside of our sails. Now, this makes this a creatively challenging stage on which to plan and present such productions, but it's also the reason why the lift space below the stage is so important. Now, the management of every performance is the responsibility of the stage manager. They work from the stage manager's desk, hidden away on what we call the prompt side of stage, so called because the stage manager prompts all elements of the performance. Now, during every show, it is the stage manager who controls all cues for the performances, such as changes to lighting, timing changes to sets and scenery, as well as ensuring the performers' lines are all delivered on time. Now, whilst this stage does not have the benefit of wing space, as we've seen, it actually has ample space below, but also up above. Sitting above this whole stage is what is called a fly tower. This huge space that rises 16 meters or 53 feet above houses 78 fly bars. We can attach almost anything to these bars, which can then be lowered and raised as desired. Most commonly, we would attach backdrops for scenery as part of the sets, but in some cases, we can even attach performers themselves. Now, in the old days of theatre, and prior to the renovation in 2017, these bars would be manually controlled by a system of ropes and pulleys. The fly tower in this theatre is now fully computer controlled, with all of the bars attached to winches that raise and lower the bars at precise speeds and with precision accuracy.
Welcome everyone for what I am sure will be a highlight of your virtual tour. The Sydney Opera House was built to showcase the human voice, and today we are very fortunate to have the incredible young soprano Olivia Cranwell here to sing for us. Opera singers are the elite athletes of the theatrical world. Olivia would do at least 4 hours vocal exercise every day, as well as studying languages, music, acting. So many skills are involved in this profession. Today, Olivia will be portraying a young woman in love. The character's name is Lauretta, and she's a teenager in love with a very inappropriate young man, and she's begging her father for permission to marry him. It's an example of teenage emotional blackmail. Here to sing O mio bambino caro from Puccini's opera Gianni Schicchi is Olivia Cranwell.
Oh, mio bambino
One of the comments there was breathtaking, and I think that perfectly encapsulates just how much we've all missed live performance. It was very impressive. So guys, it's now time to head behind the scenes and actually see where performers like Simon and Olivia go when they leave the stage. Now, this is a narrow staircase that we're entering. It's the main access path to and from the stage. Many famous opera singers have traveled this stairway, often in fact in their undergarments, as their sometimes elaborate opera gowns simply won't fit the width of the stairwell. Now, as mentioned previously, the Opera House is home to many resident companies, not just the ballet and opera. Bangarra Indigenous Dance Company, who we saw at the beginning of the tour, the Sydney Theatre Company, Bell Shakespeare, and one of our biggest, the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, all call the Opera House home. All of these performers need a space to prepare and rehearse before the show. And we're now going to look in one of the over 70 dressing rooms here at the Sydney Opera House that is used for this exact purpose. Some of the dressing rooms are huge and can accommodate more than 30 people at a time. These are usually used by members of the orchestra or ballet chorus. Others, such as the one we're about to enter, are for the stars of the show, or the principals, as they're called. Now, often these dressing rooms have their own piano to allow for private rehearsal and preparation prior to a performance. The Sydney Opera House has 26 pianos, 3 of which are Steinway grand pianos. These are the largest pianos at nearly 9 feet in length. However, the one you see before you is a Yamaha grand piano. Each of these pianos must be tuned before every single performance, a task which takes between 1 and 1.5 hours per piano. For that task, we employ Terry, who is responsible for the tuning of all of the Opera House's pianos. Now, pianos are also an expensive item, and in fact, the last Steinway concert grand piano, which we purchased in 2019, cost approximately 250,000 Australian dollars. Now, it was chosen by Piers Lane, an Australian classical pianist, who flew to the Steinway factory in Germany. Now, there he was provided with a number of different pianos to choose from. The new piano was chosen for the quality of its sound, and so the skill of the person choosing it is vitally important. Now, the principals also get a room with the best view. This one looks out a farm cove towards a headland called Mrs. Macquarie's Chair. Now, all dressing rooms provide a space for performers to have their makeup done. Some will have this done by professional makeup artists, while others will choose to do it themselves. Now, the lights positioned around the mirror are not just for show. They actually are positioned to give an even light casting across the entire face, so that makeup can be applied evenly and correctly according to the look required by the show's artistic director. Alrighty, well, folks, what I'm going to do is just pause the video in a second, just in case there were any other questions that anyone might have. It's just going a little bit there. Fantastic. Did anyone have any questions at all there? Fantastic. It doesn't appear at all.
Speechless, and they are already dreaming to be able to come there.
Fantastic. That's what we hope for. I'm glad that I'm able to do that, John. Fantastic. Alrighty, well, folks, we'll move right on to the next section. Now, the area of this part of the building is called the cleavage. It's actually situated between the concert hall sails to the left and the Joan Sutherland Theatre sails to the right. Now, people often don't realise that the surface of the sails is actually covered with tiles. Now, Utzon spent 3 years designing these unique tiles with a Swedish company called Höganäs. For Utzon, ordinary tiles simply wouldn't suffice. They needed to be the best possible. A mix of white and off-white in colour, each of the nearly 1 million tiles is first baked in the traditional way before then being coated in a ceramic slick and baked again. This actually makes the tiles self-cleaning. So all that's needed to keep the Opera House looking sparkly white is a little bit of a rain shower. Now, these are so durable that in the last 10 years, we've actually replaced less than 40 tiles. At the time of construction, it was thought to be impossible to tile a curved surface such as the Opera House. Utzon came up with an ingenious solution. The tiles were laid into prefabricated chevron-shaped lids, that diamond shape almost that you can see there. Now, each of these is ever so slightly curved to match the curve of the sails. Once set, their lids were then lifted by cranes and secured in place where they remain today. So we've now gone inside one of the sails to the western foyer of the Joan Sutherland Theatre. In 2017, the Sydney Opera House undertook major renewal works in this venue, one of the key aims of which was to improve accessibility to the foyers and seats, as previously the northern foyer was only accessible by traversing the stairs you see in front of us. The tunnel we are about to head into now was cut through from the southern foyer to the northern foyer. The new lift was then installed at the far end, making the foyers accessible to everyone, as well as the higher seats in the venue. Now, you may recall from the start of the tour that I mentioned that there were two architects responsible for the Sydney Opera House. The reason for this was a series of problems and delays with the construction of the building that resulted in the original designing architect, Jorn Utzon, being forced to leave the project well before it was completed. Initially envisaged to take about 3 years and cost $7 million, the delays began almost immediately. From an unsecure foundation under Bennelong Point to delays over how to build the shells, the construction of the Opera House was an enormously challenging undertaking at a time when workplace safety, well, it was a little different from how it is today, as you can see. Now, at the end, it took 16 years and a cost of $102 million, but it also cost Utzon his job. The government of the day, fed up with delays, was refusing to pay Utzon for his work. And so in 1966, 7 years before the building opened, he was forced to resign. Now, after Utzon's departure, the building sat empty and unfinished for nearly 2 years, until finally the government appointed Peter Hall, an Australian architect, to complete the last stage of the project. That's him in the background. The theatres and interior spaces was his main domain. His job was extremely difficult, however, as he was left to interpret Utzon's designs and deal with the mounting pressure to complete the project as quickly as possible. Despite all of this, he did an amazing job in completing the building in such a way that the interiors work in complete harmony with the exterior of the structure. The design of his concert hall, which you see here, is often considered amongst his greatest triumphs. Now, welcome to the northern foyer of the Joan Sutherland Theatre. Now, this area is used for pre-theatre dining, interval drinks, as well as being an amazing place to hold a wedding or function. That's actually thanks to the amazing views, which we'll check out in just a second. You can see all of the concrete beams which have gone into structurally holding the foyers together. So welcome to the balcony of the Joan Sutherland Theatre. This may in fact be one of the best views in all of Sydney. The only thing missing is the sails themselves of the Opera House. In front of us, we can see the world-famous Sydney Harbour Bridge, opened in 1932, about 27 years before construction of the Opera House began. And just as we pan around, you can also see a suburb called Kirribilli. This is on the other side of the harbour. Now, when the Opera House was being constructed through the 1960s, the people that lived there were actually amongst its loudest critics. The reason for this, the reason why they protested so vigorously, was that they were worried that this revolutionary building, being so abstract in its design, just across the water, was going to ruin their property values. Now, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have the same concerns these days. So everyone, we're going to head back on into the foyer. We've got plenty more to see. Now, as I mentioned earlier, accessibility changes that we made in this venue in 2017 were to fit the corridor to this northern foyer, but also an elevator, which we're going to take a ride up to. Now, this was a major undertaking, and we're actually currently doing a major undertaking like this in the concert hall side of the structure as well. Now, these works will not only improve access, but also the venue's acoustics and flexibility as well. Now, you can see the concert hall is used to present many art forms, not just the symphony, but it's also used to present contemporary rock, alternative music, circuses, musicals, talks and ideas, and even children's shows, amongst others. Now, the renewal will give us the flexibility to change the acoustics and set the venue up to suit the different art forms quickly and efficiently, opening the Opera House to new and varied audiences. Now, you can see in front of you, there's a significant amount of glass in this foyer space as well. All of this glass was imported from France and arrived in 20-meter lengths. A factory was set up on the northern Broadwalk down below, where 6,200 square meters of glass was cut into over 2,000 different panels in 700 different shapes. From there, large cranes lifted the glass into place. And it's actually strong enough, if you dropped a bowling ball from the top of the sail straight onto the glass, it wouldn't crack it or damage it in any way, shape, or form. Now let's head back into the Joan Sutherland Theatre. So welcome to the Joan Sutherland Theatre from a very different angle. Now you can see where we were standing on the stage earlier in the tour. The venue itself holds 1,500 patrons and is seated between the stalls below us, the boxes off to the side, and the circle where we're just coming back to now. Now, as mentioned before, this venue is the primary home for the opera and ballet here, the Sydney Opera House. In most instances, both art forms require an orchestra to perform the live score. Just in front of the stage, you can actually see a semicircular opening, which we're just going to illuminate now. Now that is the mouth of the orchestra pit, which actually extends back nearly 2/3 of the distance underneath the stage. It can accommodate up to 75 musicians and was also part of our renovations in 2017, where we opened this opening, we widened it just a little bit to give better sound distribution to the audience, and a significant upgrade to the environment in the pit, which now has an acoustic ceiling and air conditioning for the first time. Now, covering the pit is a net. Now, this was not always here and actually came about following a funny story involving a chicken. At the time, we had a Russian opera in residence called Boris Godunov. This featured a number of farmyard scenes. Now, this particular director was all about authenticity, and so insisted on live farm animals being on stage to complement the scenery. During one of the evening's performances, one of the chickens was wandering too close to the edge of the stage when the lead opera singer let out a large sound, just like that. Now, the chicken was scared witless and actually leapt off the front of the stage and was thrown down into the pit, landing on the head of the cellist sitting there. And naturally, chaos ensued as everything had to stop. The chicken was finally caught and thrown back up onto the stage, but the entire performance stopped for nearly 20 minutes. Since that day, we've actually had a net over the pit, which over time has stopped not only chickens, but also stray swords and misguided ballet dancers from falling into the pit below. Does anyone have any questions at all? Fantastic. All righty. Well, okay. All right. If we get any questions at all, feel free just to jump in at any time. So we are now once again in the side floor of the Joan Sutherland Theatre. Now, after Jorn Utzon left the project in 1966, he actually never returned to see the Opera House completed. Fortunately for us, there's a much happier end to this story, however. 33 years passed until in 1999, after several failed attempts, the New South Wales state government finally convinced him to return to work on the project. At the age of 81, Utzon was unable to physically return in person. Instead, he worked with his son Jan, himself a world-renowned architect, to prepare a set of design principles that would be used for future renewal and upgrading of the building. These principles were published in 2002 and formed the basis for the refurbishment of both the Joan Sutherland Theatre and the current renewal to the concert hall. And they provide an ongoing legacy for the contribution to the Sydney Opera House. Sadly, in 2008, Utzon passed away, but not without international recognition for his work. In 2003, he received the Pritzker Prize in Architecture. It's almost like the Nobel Prize in the architectural world. And then in 2007, prior to his passing, he had the great honour of seeing the Sydney Opera House inscribed on the World Heritage List, as was mentioned earlier with Jade. That making this site the youngest to ever be given such an honour, and making Utzon the only architect at the time to still be alive whilst an honour like that was received. Peter Hall, however, never really received the credit he deserved for his significant and amazing contribution to the Opera House. He passed away in 1995 at the age of 64. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that actually concludes our tour as we leave the southern foyer of the Joan Sutherland Theatre and head outside. So I'll leave you with that wonderful view of the Opera House sales. It has been an absolute pleasure having you along with us. And I hope you've enjoyed the digital tour and just seeing some of the products that we've been able to put on since COVID struck. So I hope you've all enjoyed.
Thank you very much, Declan. That was wonderful. I don't know what to say. You made us sad that you experience it, or did you really inspire and made us excited to come? Is there feelings?
Hopefully both.
Hopefully both, yes. Are there any questions for Declan before we close? I think people are still, yes, dreaming.
That's fair enough.
Do you usually do this for all visitors?
So, like I said, this is a new product that we've done since COVID struck. So we never presented this prior to COVID being around. It is an experience that we do have available to the public all around the world. So people are able to purchase tickets to come on one of these digital tours. But
do you curate it real time on live, or they're pre-recorded?
So it's all done live, exactly like I've just presented it to you now. So everything's done just like this.
Beautiful. And what is your experience by doing that?
As far as how people enjoy them, from my perspective, oh, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, more than anything, we're just so happy to be able to present some of the Opera House to people again, and recognizing that people aren't able to see
people face to face as well, isn't it?
Of course, and we do have that option for the domestic market. We have reopened tours for people who are in Sydney or able to travel up or down to Sydney as well. So we do have that that option now again, which is wonderful for us. But just in the interim, it's been fantastic, really just being able to present like this and having people on screen is still better than not having anyone at all. So so we're just really happy to be able to provide the building again.
Well, that's what we have been doing for the last 3 years in our conference. Instead of not seeing people face to face, it's better at least to see them online.
Absolutely.
But really honored. Thank you very much for doing that for us.
Of course.
It was great having you and Jade in our online social activity for our last session. What a wonderful way to conclude our conference. We appreciate, and I wish you all the best. I wish you to have people face to face very soon again.
Well, we do have a few coming back, so it's always good to see numbers rise. And if anyone here is curious about what they should do in Sydney, then definitely come down for a tour. Just to answer Naomi's question as well, we're not actually back to full performances at this stage. As Jade was mentioning, we're at about 75% capacity, but we are definitely putting performances on as well. So it's always something happening at the Opera House.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Fantastic. All righty. Well, everyone enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Have a wonderful weekend and stay safe.
You too. Thanks again, Declan.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And that concludes our session. I wish you all the best and keep watching us. We are recording.
Fantastic.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.